We're about to dive into one of the most harrowing survival stories you'll ever hear. It's about a decorated warship lost in the final chaotic days of World War II. But really, this isn't a story about a ship. It's about the men who survived its sinking only to be plunged into a nightmare that was far, far worse.
You see, this story doesn't really begin when the ship goes down. It begins after. It begins with hundreds of men just floating, alone, in the middle of this vast, empty, and incredibly hostile ocean. They're scattered for miles across the Philippine Sea, with literally nothing but the clothes on their backs.
Just try to picture that for a second. This is the scene on the morning of July 30th, 1945. Dr. Lewis Haynes, who was one of them, described this absolute nightmare. Every single man was coated, head to toe, in this thick, black fuel oil. It got in their eyes, their mouths, their noses. It was choking them, making them sick, dehydrating them even faster. And in this really terrifying way, it just erased them, turned them all into these identical anonymous figures, just fighting to stay alive.
And that fight would go on for almost 5 full days. 5 days of suffering that would push the limits of what a human being can possibly endure. So, the big question is, how did they get here? How did they end up in this unimaginable hell on Earth? Okay, to really get it, we've got to rewind a bit, to just after midnight. The Indianapolis was sailing pretty much on its own, from Guam to Leyte. They had just dropped off some critical components for the atomic bomb, so mission accomplished. There was this sense of relief on board. The captain, Charles McVeigh, had even stopped the zigzagging maneuver they used to avoid subs because the visibility was so bad that night.
And then, at 5 minutes past midnight, bam! 2 torpedoes from the Japanese sub I-58 slam into the ship's side. The first one basically rips the front of the ship right off. The second one hits midship, right where the fuel and ammo were stored. And the explosion, it was catastrophic. It literally split the ship in half.
12. That's it. In just 12 minutes, this massive 10,000-ton warship was gone. The speed was just terrifying. I mean, the power was cut almost instantly. So no communications. The radio rooms, obliterated. They couldn't send a distress signal because there was literally no way to send one. The ship went down so fast they couldn't even launch most of the lifeboats. And just like that, nearly 300 men went down with her. For the nearly 900 men who managed to get off the ship, whether they jumped or were just blown into the water, the real horror was just getting started. There they were, in the pitch-black ocean, covered in oil, with absolutely no idea if anyone in the entire world even knew what had just happened.
So now they're just out there, scattered in little groups, bobbing in the waves, completely invisible. Most of them only had these old Kapok life jackets. And yeah, they worked, at first. But after a couple of days, those jackets started to get waterlogged. They lost their buoyancy. So the very thing meant to save them started to pull them under the water.
That first day was just a blur of shock and adrenaline. You've got guys with terrible burns, broken bones, all while they're choking on fuel oil and swallowing salt water. At night, they'd huddle together to try and fight off the cold, and their cries for help were just swallowed by the ocean.
Then came day 2, and with the dawn came a new enemy, the sun. A relentless, tropical sun with absolutely no shade. It just baked them. And the reflection off the oily water was blinding. Their lips cracked, their tongues started to swell, and with every passing hour, this maddening temptation to drink the water they were floating in just got stronger and stronger.
In Dr. Haynes, he knew this was a death sentence. He was one of only 2 doctors in the water, and he spent his time swimming between the groups, just pleading with the men, don't do it, don't drink the water. But, you know, how much can words do when your body is screaming in agony for just 1 drop?
So, what actually happens when you drink salt water? It's a terrifying piece of biology. It doesn't fix your thirst. It makes it 1,000,000 times worse. Your body goes into overdrive trying to process all that salt, and to do it, it starts pulling fresh water from your own cells. It literally starts to cannibalize itself. This causes your brain to swell, you start having insane hallucinations, and your organs just shut down. By the 3rd day, the line between reality and nightmare just completely vanished. The men who drank the salt water, they started to go mad. They'd have these vivid hallucinations, screaming that the ship was right below them with freshwater fountains, and they'd swim down and never come back up. Some even started attacking their own shipmates, thinking they were the enemy. And then, just when you thought it couldn't possibly get any worse, something else showed up.
Yeah. Let's talk about the sharks. Because this wasn't some myth or exaggeration. This was horribly, horribly real. This quote from a survivor's letter, it tells the story. The sharks had been around since the sinking, drawn by the explosions and the blood. For the first 2 days, they mostly just took the bodies, but by day 3, they got bolder. They started attacking the living, pulling men under, right in front of their friends.
So you've got this perfect storm of absolute hell. Men are being pulled under by sharks. Other men are going crazy and attacking each other. Still others are just giving up, letting go, and slipping beneath the waves. You even had the ship's chaplain, Father Conway, swimming from man to man, giving prayers and last rites, until he himself was too exhausted and just perished. Hope was dying.
And after more than 4 days of this agony, salvation didn't come from a rescue party. Why? Because there wasn't one. In a series of unbelievable screw-ups, the Navy didn't even know the Indianapolis was missing. No one logged her arrival, no one raised the alarm, they were completely forgotten. Rescue when it came was pure blind luck.
The way they were found is just incredible. A Navy pilot, Wilbur Gwynn, is flying a routine patrol. His radio antenna is acting up, so he flies lower to fix it. And that's when he sees it, a huge oil slick. He goes to investigate and sees heads bobbing in the water. He radios for help, and another pilot, Adrian Marks, shows up. Marks sees sharks literally attacking the men below, so he breaks every rule in the book and lands his giant seaplane in the rough, open ocean. He and his crew start pulling men out, and when the inside is full, they start strapping them to the wings with parachute cord. He saved 56 men that day, an absolute hero.
So, the rescue finally begins, but as the first ships arrive on the scene, the true, staggering cost of this whole disaster starts to become horribly clear. For days they searched, but they were finding more bodies than living men.
You have to remember, there were nearly 1,200 men on that ship. They weren't just a number. They were veterans. They were kids fresh out of training, all part of this top-secret mission that would, ironically, help end the war.
And after 4.5 days of hell in the water, out of the roughly 900 who survived the sinking, only 316 were found alive. Just think about that. For every one man they rescued, 2 others had died out there, from the sun, the thirst, the salt, and the sharks.
In total, 880 men were lost. It is still the single greatest loss of life from one ship in the history of the U.S. Navy. A staggering number. And the real tragedy? The vast majority of them didn't die when the ship sank in 12 minutes. They died in the agonizing days that followed.
And all of this leads to this final, massive, haunting question that would plague the survivors and the Navy for decades to come. How does this happen? The fallout led to a huge controversy, a court-martial for the captain, and a tragic legacy that's a brutal reminder of just how unforgiving war and the sea can truly be.